Hi, I'm Rubin. Welcome to Armchair Philosophy, where we discuss philosophy. Why else would it be called Armchair Philosophy? Today on Armchair Philosophy, we're going to be discussing the difference between philosophy and science. Science and philosophy are both legitimate tools that are used to understand reality. They both require intense study in order to understand, and they're both useful in their own way. But what are the differences between the two? The fundamental basis of science is the scientific method and experimentation. It relies heavily on inductive reasoning. For example, in the field of psychology, Ivan Pavlov showed that classical conditioning occurs when an unconditioned stimulus is paired with a conditioned stimulus in order to make the response to that unconditioned stimulus the response to the conditioned stimulus. In Pavlov's study, he used dogs. The dogs were given food, which caused them to salivate. And while they were given food, a bell was rung, which over time caused them to salivate, although at the beginning it had no effect. There are two main fields of science. One is natural science, of which there is a list here, and the other is social sciences, which there's a list here. Natural sciences were once called natural philosophy, and social sciences might be understood in a modern setting as science done with a scientific method, but more of a philosophical outlook. Though philosophy is not exactly like science. Philosophy does not use the scientific method or experimentation. They do use thought experiments, but the main focus is in rational argumentation and deductive reasoning, as opposed to science's inductive reasoning. For example, in philosophy, we use logic. Logic such as the syllogism. If A equals B and B equals C, then logically we must conclude that A equals C. For example, all Milwaukee atheists are humans, and all humans are mortal beings. Therefore, all Milwaukee atheists are mortal beings. Philosophy's major fields are metaphysics, ethics, epistemology, and to a certain extent, aesthetics. There are other subfields of philosophy, such as the philosophy of movement, where you have the philosophy of mind, the philosophy of science, and so on. There are other branches of philosophy, such as the divide between analytical and continental philosophy in the West, Eastern philosophy, referred to in the East simply as philosophy, and other smaller subgroups, such as logical positivism and non-reductive materialism. We'll go into those later. Philosophy is not always great, though, and neither is science. Philosophy fails in that it uses no experimentation. A wide range of statements can be considered true in philosophy, even when they're conflicting. And it's simply not considered useful by a lot of people. The failures of science are that, while you can get theories, you can never produce absolute truth. And that's a failure of inductive reasoning in particular. The main difference between philosophy and science is that philosophy uses deductive reasoning, whereas science uses inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning is working down from the largest parts to the most particular, whereas inductive reasoning is working from the most particular to the most general. Through that, inductive reasoning requires generalization, which can never create an absolutely true statement. There's been a trend in our society to consider the only things to be true to be those things which are found through science, through experimentation, and through empiricism. However, logical positivism is not a correct point of view. For one thing, it's a self-defeating argument. How could I possibly convince you that logical positivism is true if I only use the experimental, empirical, and scientific methods? It's impossible. In addition, not all things can be verified or falsified empirically, and that's a major problem for the sciences. Philosophy solves this issue by using strictly deductive reasoning, going through arguments, and not paying any attention to experimentation. So why, other than the gaps provided by science, should you learn philosophy? You should learn philosophy in order to improve your arguments, because it's always fun to crush your opponent in any debate. Philosophy can teach you perspective by looking at different philosophical systems, and how to go beyond perspective by thinking purely through reason and logic. And as you can see through this chart, all of the cool kids are doing it, with philosophy majors ranking either at number 1 or in the top 5 in all categories of GRE scores. That's all for today. Thank you for watching. This has been Armchair Philosophy. Goodbye.
Yeah, it's just as you assuming it's nothing but these humans who like to blame mythology for everything they're doing. They pray for non-existent gods to clean up the mess, but never take responsibility, just claim it's a test. See, that religion you've been given is shit and it's all poison. And it's partially the reason we bleed and it's all poison. Your worldview is poison, your outlook is poison. Denied all you want, but the truth is it's all poison.